I'm always delighted when we meet up with Sister Mary, and it's too frequent, but I'm very interested here that she's been researching the life of possibly one of the greatest composers, John Sebastian Bach. I played some of his music, Mary, particularly his sonatas, but I found him a little bit of a complex composer. Was he a complex man?
I think, as far as I can tell, he was actually fairly simple he would be considered simple-minded nowadays in his faith, because he wanted everything to be for the glory of God, and he wasn't particularly interested in being famous, because his music, if you listen to it, it is complex.
Yes.
And there's sort of themes and all sorts of intricacies in there, but I mean, some of his the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of John that he did, the Passions, which he set to music. I mean, there's some of the most wonderful things to listen to. And if you listen to something like Ich will bei meinem Jesu wachen, which is very, very simple, and it's just somebody singing about, standing alongside the cross and waiting for him, and it's the poignancy of, there's a great poignancy in the simplicity of his faith. And yet it's the most complex thing in the world, so I think it's fitting.
What made you choose Bach? Why not Mahler or Beethoven, or why Bach?
Well,
have you always had an affinity to him?
I've always liked his music. I mean, I love classical music, but after I became Christian, I started to sort of feel. It wasn't just an intellectual or emotional pleasure that I was getting from his music. You sort of feel a kind of as though you're sort of engaged in a shared act of worship. And I think I must have gone through a phase. I just kept listening to particular hymns and things of his over and over again, and I think because if you listen to Beethoven, I mean, everybody loves Beethoven, but I feel sort of sorry for Beethoven in a way, because his most famous hymn, of course, is Ode to Joy, which, hijacked when you look at it,
by the socialists.
But when you look at the actual lyrics of Ode to Joy, they're not sort of praising God at all. I mean, in fact, they are very occultic.
I think that's why the socialists and the EU adopted it.
I think so, yeah. But he was very secular in his outlook, and I feel terribly sorry that he had this wonderful God-given gift, but he never turned it over to God.
And of course, in the final years, he couldn't hear it.
I know, which is dreadful. But the thing is, he did have a wonderful gift, Beethoven, but everything you have is empty until you offer it up to God. I mean, for example, we have a guy playing bamboo pipes up there who's making a lovely noise, beautiful
just a
sound.
Beautiful noise.
It's just a beautiful noise. But if you listen to even the worst choir in the world singing, if they're singing with heart, then it's an offering.
Tell us a little bit about Bach, when he was born, and I know he was the organist of the church. Was it in Leipzig?
I think so.
And I heard a story, James, I don't know if it's true or not, that he could play the organ and at the same time carry on a game of chess with one of his sons, probably Christian Bach. What a mind.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting, that his faith was so incredibly simple. The other thing I was interested in was that his family had a connection with the Reformation. I think it was his great-grandfather was in, I forget where Luther hid when he was translating the Bible, but his Bach's I think it was his great-grandfather, was from that area, and was persecuted and actually had to flee because he was, he was helping sort of disseminate Bible literature.
What about his family, Mary? I heard a story attributed, strangely enough, to Francois Mitterrand for the wonderful Sheep May Safely Graze, that he wrote this after several members of his family died. Can you confirm anything about this?
He had a lot of children, and he did lose a lot of children in infancy, and I know his wife was also very devout, and I think, I've only got one child, and I think, and you're a parent yourself, and I can't think of anything that's more painful for a parent than to lose their children. And I think there's a tradition as well, not a tradition, it's not sort of deliberately done, but there is. If you look at the Psalms, for example. A lot of the Psalms were written at times of great personal anguish, and yet they give consolation, and they gave consolation to the poet. You know, David sang the blues. You know, and I think that's what Bach was doing, because God gives and He takes away.
Is there still a place for Bach, do you think, in today's music?
I think there is, but I think a lot of people just listen to him as sort of a technical composer or a great musician, a great mind, but they don't actually think about what it was that inspired him from when he was actually very young to sort of turn his music over, to sort of make it an offering. And it's a shame that nowadays you see so many very talented people with so many gifts, and I've noticed this in churches as well. You'll get the soloist stand up and she'll deliver a great performance of a hymn, and it's not actually an offering. It's a showpiece.
I read somewhere, I'm not sure who said it, but they considered Bach, Johann Sebastian, as the first born-again composer. What do you make of that statement, Mary?
I don't know. We don't know. No. We don't know people's sort of spiritual biographies, really. We don't know who God knows.
I suppose we tie him in with, wouldn't we, with Haydn and Mozart, Hummel, Salieri. What about those guys?
Well, I think everybody sort of got their notion of Salieri from that movie.
I know.
I always sort of hoped, and you never know, I did hope that because the last thing Mozart was working on was, it was...
The Requiem, wasn't it?
The Requiem.
Yeah.
You hope that pondering those lyrics while he was on his deathbed and performing that music, you never know what may have happened.
There's then the theory that it was commissioned by the Masons, of course. You know, this mysterious visitor who came to him in a black cloak. And
it could be, could be, and I know that there's a very famous portrait of Mozart performing blindfold in a Masonic court.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible.
I think that slightly taints my image of Mozart, and I suppose enjoying his music. Beethoven I'm not sure about, possibly Haydn, but nothing on Bach, nothing at all.
As far as I can tell, like most people going through life, he'll have been compromised at various stages, but as far as I can tell, he sort of did try to dedicate his life to
the wonder of God.
To God,
yeah.
And raised his children in the faith. And I also believe it says, when it says in the Ten Commandments about honour your father and your mother, and he will bless the descendants of those that love me.
Yeah.
And he does actually bless Bach's great-grandfather who was disseminating Bible literature and persecuted for his faith, and he was a self-taught lutenist and considered very talented, but had never had the benefits of actually being instructed in music. And the sort of like a Bach dynasty, there was musicians all through for generations, so God did actually bless that entire family through the gift he had given them, and which Bach in particular chose to give back.
What have you found out about him that you didn't know?
I hadn't realised how hard his life was. You know, that he wasn't actually wealthy, and he was he lost children. I hadn't realised the extent of his poverty. Doesn't seem to have influenced his. He doesn't complain. He just gets on.
Of course, in those days, composers had to rely on commissions from princes and cardinals and archbishops and so forth.
Yeah, and I think because he wouldn't sort of tickle the ears, and he wasn't a particularly politic man. So with I think 16 kids, that obviously makes life a little bit difficult. And he's buried without a stone.
Is he?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
And I think James was saying that was common in those days.
So what are you going to take to the desert island? One desert island of Bach's.
St. Matthew's Passion.
By any favourite conductor, orchestra? The German orchestra has to be.
It would have to be. It have to be. Yeah. I'm thinking. I've got one at home, but I forget exactly what it's called, so I'll not embarrass myself.
Well, there we are. The great Johann Sebastian Bach, as discovered by Mary, and some wonderful insights in the man I didn't know about. Check St. Matthew's Passion out. We're coming up to Easter. We're coming up to Good Friday.
And I've just realised. My brain's gone blank. I've just realised that the last thing he wrote on his deathbed, it's a piece of organ music, and it was a little thing to the glory of God, and it's very, very simple, and it's a kind of it's a Trinitarian melody going through, and he was dictating that on his deathbed. His son wrote it down for him, and it was just a little praise.
Well, there we are, check it out. So just cut you short, Mary. As always from this ministry, Maranatha, safe journey back to Norfolk to Sister Mary.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you.
Okay.